Okay, this is the final bit of the percentage change questions, or the percentage increases, decreases, and so on. So the next bit that we need to be able to do is profit and loss. So first of all, I'm going to go through some of these words because people are often not that familiar with them. So one of the words you're going to get is revenue. Revenue is how much money you've taken, ignoring what your expenses were. So it's just how much money people have given you over the counter, if you like. So to find revenue, if you're not given it, you'd get the price of the good and you'd times it by the quantity. How many of those goods have you sold? So in summary form, it would be P, price, times X, which is how many of them ever sold. Costs, typically, not always, but they're generally in a linear equation form. So yeah, I wrote it as mx plus b. M is, of course, your gradient. You'd recognise this as a linear equation. And your gradient basically tells you the cost per item. So, and this is also what we call a variable cost, because it will change depending on how many items I get, but each item would cost me a particular amount. And typically what we have is a variable cost and a fixed cost. So this B, which you would recognise as being your y-intercept, is what it costs you to sell your goods before you've even made a single good. So that's typically your capital items. So this is my fixed costs. And I'm going to put in brackets under there capital. So, for example, in one of the questions we do in Year 10, you're selling T-shirts. So before you even begin selling T-shirts, you need to buy a sewing machine. You might need a printer to print your logos and things on and all the rest of it. So you've got to buy all these things in order to start manufacturing. And you're going to pay for that. It's a one-off cost, and you're going to pay it regardless of whether you make one T-shirt or millions of them. And so that's your fixed cost, and that would be shown on the intercept of your axis. So if I was to graph your costs, that B would be my startup cost. And then I'm going to have to also buy fabric. So if I was making T-shirts, I'm going to buy a certain amount of fabric and a certain amount of cotton per T-shirt, maybe even a certain amount of ink for the logos or whatever. So that would be my variable costs, and that would be shown as my gradient. And so for each T-shirt I make, I'm going to add those variable costs, and it would step up, and that would become my gradient. So that's typically how your costs are. You might not have fixed costs for whatever you're doing, so it might just be the per unit cost times how many units, but typically that's the way it's going to go. Profit, on the other hand, is how much money you've actually made from your venture. So that's the revenue, the money you've taken in from it, take away the costs that it did. The biggest mistake people have here is that costs typically have those two components, and it's typically a BIMDAS error. If you don't bracket this, what typically people, if I wrote this without the brackets, I'd go price times X, so that's my revenue. I'd take away this MX, and without the brackets, I'm then adding that fixed cost instead of subtracting it, because really that subtraction is being applied to both of those things. So really I've got minus MX and then minus the B as well. But the bracket will save you from having to do that. But do keep an eye on it, make sure you use the bracket, because otherwise you're going to think you've done the right thing and you'll get a wonky result. Now, if you did this process and you've got a negative answer, then you've just made a loss. But anyway, we'll call it profit for the moment. So sometimes they ask you for the actual dollar amount of the profit, and that's what we've calculated in this equation here. Sometimes they'll ask you for a percentage profit or loss. So a percentage profit would obviously be a percentage increase, a percentage loss will be a percentage decrease. But if I wanted to put a general formula on finding that, I'd get my profit or loss and divide it by my initial cost or investment. That on its own, just that fraction, is basically my multiplier. I'm going to write that under there to remind you. So if you're happy interpreting multipliers, and I really would encourage you to make sure you do get to a point where you are happy, that's all you need to do. If you're not happy with doing that, then you're going to basically times that number by 100 to turn it into a percentage change. Or you can use that percentage change formula. So in that case, you'd be putting your end value, what your venture was worth at the end, over your start value or your original value. As you say, that's the multiplier, so take away 1, we'll turn it into a decimal answer, and then timesing it by 100 will turn it into your final sort of answer. And I think that's really all you need to know there. Let's have a look, and I think we can go on. I feel like I've missed something. I think it's the percentage of. So in all our formulas so far, what we've not covered is percentage of. And percentage of is basically, instead of doing the 1 plus or the 1 take, you're just doing whatever the percentage was divided by 100, and then timesing that by the original amount, or the, whatever it is that they've given you, and that's going to equal to your what that percentage of is. So it's equal to your percentage of. So if I said, let's find 20% of 200, then I'm basically going 20 over 100, which is 0.2, timesing it by my 200. And again, if I had to do that mentally, 10% would be moving the decimal one spot, so 10% would be 20. So doubling that would give me 40. So I'm going to be going, or just 40 because I'm not increasing or decreasing, so my answer there would just be 40. So that was the only other equation that we forgot, so we'll add that to your list. Okay, so these are some of the review questions in CLUP. So let's have a go and let's have a look at this. So this is question 11. An item purchased for $450 was sold at a profit of 20%. So what was the selling price of the item? So basically I'm going to increase this by 20%. So I started at 450, timesing by my multiplier. I'm going up by 20%, so 1 plus my 20 on 100, and away I'd go there and I'd get my answer. I won't bother putting these through my calculator because you can operate a calculator. I'm just going to set these questions up so that you get the gist of how to do them. Again, if I had to do it mentally, 10% would be 45, 20% is therefore going to be 90, so I'm going to add $90 to that. Question 12, an item sold for $999, realised a profit of 35%. So what was the cost of the item? So we don't know what the original cost of the item was, but we know that it made a 35% increase. So my multiplier would have been 1 plus my 35 on 100, or 1.35. And the final answer, what it sold for, was $999. So to find my original price, I need to do the opposite of timesing to get x on its own. The x is staying where it is, the 999 staying where it is. I needed to move the times. The opposite of timesing is dividing, so I'm going to divide it instead by the 1.35, and that would give me my original price. Question 13, an item purchased for $450 was sold at a loss of 8%. What was the selling price of the item? So I've purchased it for $450. I'm going to make a loss of 8%, so I'm timesing it by 1 take the 8 on 100, which is of course a multiplier of 0.92, and that would give me my final selling price, which is going to be a bit less. As soon as we see a 0, we know that we're going down. An item sold for $5,176 was sold at a loss of 20%. What was the cost of the item? So we don't know the original cost, but we know if we were going to do the calculation, we would have timesed it by 1 take the 20 on 100, which is 1 take 0.2, so that's 100 on adding decimals that don't exist. So I'm timesing it by 0.8 to get my new amount, and you just put that straight through. Increase 800 by 16%, so again 800 times 1 plus the 16 on 100, which will be 1.16 when you process that bracket, and then away you go. Make sure you can do those mentally, so I'm sort of just showing you how to set these up, what the maths is required, but do when you practice them, use things like the Arabic method or the 10%, 1% rules to make sure you can mentally do these. Decrease 860 by 14%, so if you decrease it would be 1 take the 14 on 100, and away we go. Let's see if there's anything a bit trickier as we go along. Okay, let's do Barry. So Barry pays $144.50 for an item after receiving a 15% discount on the normal price. How much would he have paid for this item if instead he had received a 20% discount? So to do that, it's just a 2-step process. First, we have to find the original amount, and then we're going to take the 20% off. So if he paid $144.50 after a 15% discount, we don't know what the original price was, but we would have timesed it by 1 take the 15 on 100, which is 0.15. So we're timesing it by 0.85 because he's paid 85% of the original price. And the answer to that was $144.50. So again, if you know what I'm really going to be doing here to get x on its own, x is staying, the 144.50 is staying. Instead of timesing, I'm going to divide by that multiplier, which is 0.85. The other thing I want you to bear in mind is that you don't really need to do that at all in most of this course. If you've got it in your calculator section, which you probably would be for this, once you've written down it, once you've gone through that thought process, you can literally highlight it and do that highlight, interactive, advanced solve, and it will solve it for you without any algebra. So if your algebra is not very good, I'd go straight to that step. And in terms of working, that is all you're required to show. You're required to show your original equation with all your numbers substituted into it, and you're required to show your final answer. So you could do that. Now, once we've found this number, so I better do it so we can process it further. So 144.5 divided by 0.85 gave me an original price of 170. So my x was equal to 170. If he'd instead received a 20% discount, then we're basically just going to now discount that 170 by 20%. So times 1, take the 20 on 100. 20 on 100 is 0.2, so we're really timesing it by 0.8, and that would give us what he now would have paid if he'd got a 20% discount instead. Okay, what else have we got here? Calculate the percentage profit made. I'll do that one because that's an example, one of those change ones. So calculate the percentage profit made when an item that cost 140 is sold for 203. So it's basically your new price over your starting price. If I do just that, that's my multiplier. So 203 divided by 140 would give me a multiplier, just this bit, of 1.45. So if you're happy interpreting multipliers, then hopefully what you'd recognise that the one times anything keeps its original amount. So the 1 shows me that I'm going to go up, and what I'm going up by is this 45%. If I times that decimal by 100, that's going to give me. So I could just look at that and go, well, I know from that multiplier that I've gone up, because I had the 1, by 45%. If you're not happy with the multipliers, then you're going to do that percentage change equation. You're going to go the new over the old, which we've done, take away 1. So that so far would give me a 0.45, and then times it by 100, and that's going to give me an answer of 45%. Alternatively, you could have used that first formula that I did is when you go, what's the profit? So the profit here, 203, take 140, gives me 63. So if I use that rule, I would have gone, sorry, I'll change colours here. So if I use that rule, my profit was 63 divided by my starting amount, which was 140. So if you put that into your calculator, you get 0.45. And then, of course, timesing that by 100 gives you the 45%. It doesn't matter which rule you use. So you either calculate the profit first and then divide it by the original amount. Don't sort of, some people memorise this at the bigger number or the smaller number. It's irrelevant whether it's bigger or smaller. Sometimes we've made a loss, sometimes we've made a profit, but it's always the original amount that goes on the base of the fraction. Okay. A caravan purchase for $18,590 is expected to depreciate, so go down by 15% per annum. PA means per annum. The purchase price of a caravan included GST at 10%. So how much GST was included in the purchase price? So for just the GST, you're just going to go that. Whoopsie, sorry. You're going to go 18,590 purchase. That was the purchase price, so that would have included GST. Purchase price included GST, so how much GST? So I'm going to divide that by 11 to get the GST. So 18,590 divided by 11 means that what I paid in GST would have been 1,690. What will be the value of the caravan after 5 years? So for that, we've got our purchase price. It's depreciating by 15%, so timesing it by 1, take 15 on 100. So I'm going down by 15%, or I'm keeping 85% is what that multiplier would be. That's going to go on for 5 years, so I'd raise that to a power of 5. Give your answer to the nearest 50. So let's do this. So 18,590 times 0.85 to the power of 5 would give me an answer of, I'll put it in full first, so $8,248.48. We want this to the nearest $50, so it would be $8,250 is my final answer. after how many years will the value of the caravan first be less than 10,000? So in this case, assuming that the depreciation rate is still 15%, of course, so we've got 18,590 times 1 take my 15 on 100, or 0.85. If you're happy using them, you can jump straight to that. And what we want to know is after how many years. So what we don't know is what this power is. So my x is up there, and when will that first be less than 10,000? Easiest way to do that is to put it into your calculator like this and go highlight, interactive, advanced, solve. A lot of you don't like using the less than signs, just use an equal sign, but remember to round it so it doesn't really matter which way you put that in. So I will just pop that into my calculator. So if I put the equals, so I know from experience that's what most of you are going to do, highlight, interactive, advanced, solve. I've used X, so I'll just hit OK, and I get an answer in my class pad of X is equal to 3.81, yada yada yada, 815, and so it goes. So roughly it would be 3 years that it first, so at 3 years it won't quite have, it's 3 to 4 years, or actually closer to 4 years, so approximately it would be 4 years. At 3 years it won't yet have gone below it, at 4 years it will have gone too far. So yeah, and so that's, I'm just doing a double check on that. Yeah, so that's all you need to do there. The caravan is sold 3 years after being purchased for its depreciation value. So what percentage loss is made on the purchase price? So basically you're just finding, so if we find the value, so we would have gone, oopsies, 18,590 times 0.85, or your 1 take 15 on 100, to the power of 3. And that would give me a caravan value now of $11,416.58. And so what percentage loss? I'm basically doing that 11416.58 is new price over its original price, which was the 18,590. That on its own would just be a multiplier. So I'll just pop that into my calculator. 18,590. That would give me a multiplier of 0.61. As soon as we see a 0, we know we've gone down. And just be careful here, I've not gone down by 61%. 0.61 is what I have left. So I've got 61% left, which means I've lost 39%. So when you come to interpret those, when it is a 0, you've got to pay special careful attention to make sure that you do remember that. You've got 61%, so I've lost 39. If I'll rub this out. If you know you're not super good with these sorts of things, then stick to the formula in its full form, which was your new price, your original price, your current price, which is what it's currently worth, over the original price, and then you do the take one, okay, and then you times that by 100, and that would automatically bring you up with the 0.39, or sorry, once I've times it by 100, it's actually going to give me the 39. So that would automatically give me my 39%. So if you're happy with multipliers, just watch that little trap when it's a 0 to make sure you do the 1 take sort of business. If you're not happy with multipliers, stick to your formula in whole. Okay, I might stop that one.